Good evening. When the government announced travel corridors to allow people abroad for some summer sun, it was always with the caveat that they might have to change those rules. Well, on Saturday, Spain was removed from the list of safe places to travel with just hours' notice after a surge in coronavirus cases on the Spanish mainland. It left thousands of Londoners facing 2 weeks quarantine and the chaos to personal lives and finances that comes with that. Our political correspondent Simon Harris reports.
When in Ibiza.
It was meant to be a relaxing break before the stress of moving house. But that's not how the trip to Ibiza turned out for Londoner Jackie Adedeji. She's now facing 2 weeks quarantine when she gets home and a dilemma.
If I'm supposed to self-quarantine for 14 days, then how am I supposed to leave my house, especially as someone is literally taking my bedroom from the 9th of August. So if I have to quarantine for 14 days, then where am I going to live? Can this person take my room? You know, I'm quite concerned with, I don't actually technically have a room anymore.
The compulsory quarantine could not have come at a worse time for the travel industry. And it came as a shock to holidaymakers, although passengers arriving at Gatwick today seemed resigned to their new lockdown.
It's what I have to do, so I'll do it. I mean, I've got things to do, really, indoors, so that's fine.
Luckily, I can work from home, but I'm just going to be so bored.
Because I live in Spain, I'm staying at my daughter's anyway for 2 weeks.
I'm lucky that I'm employed, but my friend who's self-employed, he's got 2 weeks without pay off, just going away. It's tough, isn't it?
Quarantine means people who were expecting to go to work when they got home now can't. A self-employed cleaner in London could lose almost £700. The loss of earnings for a painter and decorator could be more than £1,000, and double that for a self-employed builder who could lose £3,000.
What we said when we introduced the travel corridors policy, recognising that we wanted to enable people to go on holiday to places where rates were low, but we said we would have to keep it under review. So that's exactly what we've done, and then we've taken this rapid, decisive action for Spain. We will have to keep other countries under review as well.
Which is not a reassuring message for anyone about to fly or tempted to make a last-minute booking. Mediterranean beaches might seem even more attractive without the usual crowds. This was Mallorca today. But as holidaymakers returning from Spain are finding out, there could be a surprise extra cost to that relaxing break in the sun.
Well, for more information on what some of the major airlines and travel firms are offering their customers, just head online to ITV London. Simon joins me now in the studio. So, Simon, in more COVID-related news, there was an unusual case reported here today, wasn't there?
Yes, scientists in Surrey think they've discovered the first case in this country of coronavirus in a pet cat. A vet initially diagnosed a common feline respiratory illness, but to be on the safe side, a sample from the animal was sent to the Animal and Plant Health Agency at Weybridge, where COVID-19 was diagnosed. Now, it's thought the cat caught the illness from the owners, not the other way round, which, although not very nice for the cat, is reassuring because scientists say there's still no evidence that the virus can be transmitted from animals to people, and so no cause for alarm. As for the cat and its owners, they've made a full recovery.
All right, Simon, thank you. For the last 7 years, Anne and Ron Ryle have been trying to save their dream home from being bulldozed to make way for HS2. The route for the £100 billion high-speed railway goes right through their 400-year-old red brick house in the Colne Valley. Now they've been told they must leave the farmhouse by Friday. Our political correspondent Simon Harris has more.
Basically, I've got to be out of the house by Friday, or at least hand it over on Friday.
Ron Ryle has come to the end of the line. His 7-year battle to save his home from the bulldozers is over.
It's a David and Goliath situation, and David's standing there, me, I've got a slingshot, and they've stolen all the pebbles. Basically, that's how it is. I'm looking around for something else I can use, and there's nothing I can use.
Ron and his wife Anne spent years restoring the period farmhouse at Harefield in West London, but it sits in the way of a concrete viaduct needed to carry the new HS2 railway line over the Colne Valley. They're swapping their 7-bed family home for a 2 up, 2 down, a few hundred metres away.
And what I'm going into is not exactly what I want, but it's the nearest thing that I can get to being where I've always been all my life.
The Ryles aren't the only ones on the move. Across the valley, anti-HS2 protesters have set up another camp. They're trying to stop trees being chopped down, and in a constant game of cat and mouse, 2 of them ended up in the water last week.
Someone help her!
Help her!
He's about to fall off!
Oh, please help!
He's going to fall off! A 19-year-old who calls himself Laser was taken to hospital after his fall. Today, the teenager was reflecting on his lucky escape.
The first thing I was told when I got in the ambulance is that I could have been killed, or it was I was very, very lucky that I've not got life-changing injuries. They put me through loads of scans because they thought I'd have spine damage or brain damage or whatever.
Does what happened to you put you off?
It does put me off. I don't want to die, and I don't want any of my friends to risk my life. I'm very young, I'm a teenager.
The clashes between bailiffs and environmentalists have led to a new blame game.
HS2 accused the activists of endangering themselves. It claims to have spent £16 million trying to stop the protests.
An HS2 spokesperson said these reckless and unlawful protests are a threat to the security and safety of the public and our workers and are costly to the taxpayer. At Jews Farm, Ron Ryle is counting the cost to his family of the £106 billion project. This will be his last harvest from his fruit trees. Simon Harris, ITV News, Harefield.
Good evening. At Southend Airport today, those desperate to get away to Spain were doing so in the knowledge that when they get back, they will have to quarantine for a fortnight. But thousands of others have already cancelled or postponed their trips, prompting airport bosses to call on the government to limit restrictions and offer more testing at airports instead. They say that would encourage flyers and help an industry already hit hard by the pandemic. It's as Transport Minister Grant Shapps returned early from his holiday in Spain, but again, he said testing was not the answer. Here's our political correspondent Simon Harris with the details.
At Southend Airport, the great summer getaway amounts to a trickle of passengers. There were no queues at check-in and no problems social distancing. Holidaymakers heading for Spain were boarding a handful of budget airline flights to Alicante and Malaga. The new quarantine rules and the Prime Minister's warning about a second wave of the virus in Europe didn't seem to worry those travelling today.
I'm lucky that I don't work. The children aren't at school yet, so it doesn't really make too much difference to us. We've done months. What's another 2 weeks?
EasyJet is still flying, so we're getting on that plane.
Not worried, because I think they've been so good in Spain with their coronavirus procedures, lockdowns, that probably safer in Spain than here.
The neat rows of parked planes tell their own story. Their jets are silent. This is an airport where you can hear birdsong. Quarantine for returning Spanish holidaymakers is an untimely setback for an industry struggling to recover.
One idea floated by the boss of Heathrow Airport is for passengers to be given a coronavirus test when they land. But ministers weren't convinced.
The Transport Secretary, Grant Shapps, is now in quarantine after cutting short his family holiday in Spain.
One of the things that people don't realise with testing is if you test somebody who's asymptomatic, they don't have any signs of coronavirus, on day one when they arrive at an airport, that would only pick up 7% of people who actually did have the disease.
The boss of Southend Airport also has doubts about the value of testing passengers.
We also need people to be confident that the results of the test can come back quickly enough and that they can be accurate enough. Now, if you can answer those questions and do it at the right price, then perhaps there's some value in it. But until that's the case, then I think people will be slightly uncertain, and uncertainty is the biggest problem. Right now, what we really need is consumer confidence.
This time last year, Southend was handling 40 flights a day. Today, it's down to 5. The airport's owners are confident business will bounce back, but not for a few years. Simon Harris, ITV News, Southend Airport.
OK, let's move on to the rest of the day's news. And one man has been shot dead and another stabbed to death within hours of each other in a night of violence across the capital. There have now been 17 violent crime murders this month alone. Our political correspondent, Simon Harris, has more.
Another deadly night on the streets of London. In Edmonton, a man believed to be in his mid-20s was shot on a housing estate and died despite efforts to resuscitate him. Chris Egbers, who was walking her dog at the time of the shooting, says a friend saw the victim running for his life.
And he was running, from the people that have actually shot him. Apparently that he arrived at the opposite block and they saw him and they started shooting at him, and he tried to get away from them.
What would you like to tell those that are watching us on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter?
Yomi Koiki is a journalist who broadcasts to his followers on social media. He arrived at the police cordon at the same time as the victim's family and friends.
It was very tense, extremely tense. And you could see that they wanted to get into that direction. They were being stopped from not going further from where the crime scene is. They were moving around. The father came out of a vehicle with another young girl, and he insisted that he wanted to see the son. That is what made me believe that that is the father.
Coronavirus might have offered a brief respite from the relentless violence in London, but it appears to be over. Even with lockdown, more than 70 people have died violent deaths in London this year. July has had the highest death rate, with 17 victims. They include a 32-year-old man stabbed to death in the early hours of this morning at a party in Hounslow. A 22-year-old woman has been arrested on suspicion of conspiracy to murder.
I'm really worried about as lockdown is eased and restrictions are lifted, there'll be a huge increase in violent crime. Actually, the police and myself have been warning about this for some months now.
The murder in Edmonton is evidence of another worrying trend this month, a rise in the number of shootings. Simon Harris, ITV News, Edmonton.